Hello there, and welcome to the I Never Knew podcast, also known as Inc. This show dives into the life experiences of people who have been through it all and have come through the other side stronger, better, and triumphant. Each story is raw, authentic, and, at times, heartbreaking. One thing joins it all together: the fact that the stories can help the listener learn and grow. Hosted by life coach Maureen, she sits down each episode with a new guest who will empower the listener to set out on their self-discovery journey and start to heal. Now you'll be joined by Maureen and her special guest. Please enjoy the show.
Welcome to another episode of I Never Knew, or Inc. by Life Coach Maureen. So happy to have you all here, and I love all of my guests, but my next guest and I have been on several panels on her version with Sabrina Victoria from Human 365. And we don't get to talk one-on-one, so we decided it's time to have a girlfriend's chat on the podcast today. Our stories are very similar, and I'm going to tell you all about her. So her name is Sharmon Johnson. Sharmon grew up in a strict religious household. She got married at 18 to escape her father. She ended up marrying someone who was verbally and emotionally abusive. She had 3 sons. She found the courage to leave the relationship only to fall right back into a relationship with a narcissist. Got married, had 2 more children, and found the courage to leave that relationship with no money and no career. She built the life she has now, one step at a time. She runs her own childcare business, and she has built a wonderful circle of families that she works closely with, while also being a single mom to her college junior and high school senior, still living at home. Hello, my busy, beautiful friend, Sharmon.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So happy to have you here. So it's so funny how similar our stories are, and we've talked about it offline a little bit. I got married at 18 as well, had my first one at 19, abusive, alcoholic. Next relationship, that marriage didn't work well, couldn't do the blended family very well, got into 2 more relationships with narcissists. So my soul sister, let's talk about our crazy past selves. Tell me, the difference between you and I is the religion background, where I had none. My father was an atheist, my mom was a Catholic, and they basically said we're not going to do anything in the home. And I think that has a lot to do with a lot of people's stories of struggle and, you know, sort of that shaming that we need to stay in these relationships. So tell me your story in your words from the beginning.
So I grew up in like a really strict religion. So our base was like, you didn't get divorced, married for life. But my dad used religion to like control all of us. So I don't know if my dad really was narcissistic, you know, like he didn't like fit in like that. But now everything that I've learned, I think that there probably was that. And he was the kind that used religion. Like he, you know, quoted the Bible verses, and I had to wear dresses. I had to keep my hair long. And
wow, that's
like,
so interesting. What religion, if you mind me?
It was Seventh-day Adventist.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tell me about that, and what do you think what impact did it have growing up, and what kind of programming do you think it instilled for you future?
I think it instilled for me to be I think it a fear, like, you know, like we were taught like you know, God's coming back soon, you know, everything is like the world was going to end. And so like I think a big part of one of the things is from getting away from my dad, my controlling dad, was also the fear of like the world is going to end and I'm not going to get to grow up and get to be married and have kids and, you know, and all of those things. So like there was like this feeling of rushing, like that I felt this sense of rushing because it was like really drilled into us. Like we're living in the last days and, you know, God's going to come back. And also that feeling of you're never good enough. You can never be good enough, you know, like, cause you lie as a little kid, you tell white lies. And especially if you have a dad who's super controlling. By the time I was a teenager, you know, I was telling lots of lies to like get away.
It's almost like it backfires. Like he's telling you the end of days are coming and you're like, oh, well, shoot, I'm going to go live life because it's going to end soon anyway. I'm going to go out and do whatever I want to do. And then, you know, like you said, the little white lies turn into these big lies because it doesn't matter whether I'm compliant or not, you're still not going to find me good enough. And so then it just becomes sort of this rebellion, right?
Right. Yes. Yeah.
I can relate to that, even though we didn't have religion in my house. My mother was raised Catholic. And as you know, with Catholicism, it's always guilt and judgment. And so I felt the same way growing up. I felt I was never good. I could never be good enough. She even told me one time, my mom said, I wanted perfect kids. And it's impossible. You can't have perfect kids. And now we have a great relationship and you know, we've talked through a lot of things and she regrets a lot of things that she did, but that's how I felt too. And I couldn't wait to get out of the house. And the first guy that came along that I fell in love with, boom, I got married and got pregnant, or the other way around, got pregnant and got married. So, you know, so what did your family think about you getting married so young and getting pregnant?
Well, that's the thing is my mom, she believed that you stayed married forever, but there was lots of fighting and I had a brother. My mom had a third child who died of cancer. He was born with a tumor. And then by the time he was 4, so I was 8 when he passed away and he was 4. It was just after his 4th birthday. And so I remember my early years hiding in the closet from my parents, fighting over his treatments and just all those things. It was like a high stress situation. But because of the beliefs, my parents are 3rd generation in the religion and stuff, you know, like you just stayed together, but there was lots of fighting throughout. But then when I turned 17, my mom finally had enough. She got to this point in her life where she was like, if he's going to be in heaven, I'd rather be in hell. And she gave up all her beliefs, like, because in that religion, like you're vegetarian, you don't have caffeine or alcohol, you don't smoke. So my mom, being a 3rd generation, she was raised very strict like that too. And when I was 17, we left. I remember she packed us up and we left the house, went and stayed in a hotel and for a few days. And my dad's brother like called and like tried to talk her, you know, like you can't do this. And, you know, and it was the first time that I saw her like stay resolute about like, but also I saw her as this like kind of like giving up on life, you know, like she thought she was going to hell. She thought she had made a choice. And then but it was during that year, is that same summer that she left my dad, is when I met my first husband, like, and we bonded over our terrible fathers and our terrible like toxic fighting, you know, childhood and the stories, you know, that we both had. We bonded over that, which is a bad place to bond over.
Right. And at that age, we don't even know ourselves yet.
No.
We're just kind of like, find me a savior outside of my house. And oh my gosh, there's so much to unpack about what you just said. You finally see mom get strong enough to leave, which instills a good thing. It says, okay, I can do this, even though we were scared to death our whole lives, and she was right on board with dad of we can't do this.
Yep.
Then you saw her sort of lose herself to my life is over, I'm going to hell. So the beliefs were still there. She just was more adamant about getting away from there. Now, did they end up getting divorced or get back
They
together?
did. Nope, they got divorced. Um, and uh, so yeah, she stayed resolute in it, and they got divorced. And my dad just kind of went. My mom was a nurse, and she was the breadwinner. And my dad, he had a handicap. He was a twin who was born um, breech. And so they injured him. They pinched a nerve in his neck. So like his right side, I remember his right arm was kind of like curled up, kind of paralyzed from his birth injury. So his parents like protected him. So his brothers and sisters were like encouraged to do sports and all this stuff, and and have this normal life. And his parents felt they would always tell him, you're never going to get married, you're not going to have kids. They put him in special schools because they felt that he was slow or whatever, but he wasn't. And I think there is a sort of narcissism to how he was raised, because they were they were doing everything for his own good. Because his parents were my favorite grandparents. I love them, best people, but they were only doing what they thought to protect him, and he went out and proved them all wrong. He got married, he had kids, it's a beautiful family and everything, but he like suffocated all of us, with this image and what his parents thought of him and how his siblings saw him, and all of that mattered more than anything. Um so he went to school. He ran the printers for like a big, like a newspaper, but it was for like a university thing. And as computers came in, it did his job. He didn't have that skill. That skill was not needed. And so when my parents got divorced, he was just kind of like, at one point he was living in his car, like it was really, really bad for him. And I think my mom felt like really guilty about it, but that's how bad. That's at like where she was in her thoughts, was like, I can't do it. But I think that's why she stayed so long, because she was the one who paid all the bills, took care of everything, took care of him, and she knew there was a part of her that knew that he couldn't make it on his own, kind of a thing. But he was a force to be reckoned with. So he ended up starting his own business. He was very, very headstrong. And he ended up with his own taxi business. He like in Florida is where I'm from. And yeah, he had his one car, and he did a courier. He added on like doing special courier services. So he ended up, he had his own little place. He had a roommate, and and he ended up doing fine on his own. But that first year was like really rough. And I remember feeling so bad for him, but also my mom ended up jumping right into another relationship, which was the older brother to the guy that I married. That we met them both in the community. So,
This story's getting
so
it's getting even better.
It sounds terrible, but
no, it doesn't. It sounds fascinating. I love this. There is no judgment. This is a judgment-free zone. You know what? We did what we did, and you know what? That's why you're the beautiful person in front of me. We learned all these things, but I want to go back. What's interesting is his family. So your dad's family sort of kept him like the boy in the bubble, basically saying,
right.
You're this fragile guy, and inside he's like, no, I'm really not. He proves himself not to be this fragile, delicate, incapable person. He's really hard on his family because he wants to prove how capable he is, and unfortunately his projection of proving came down on you guys. And then your mother gets strong enough to say, I can't do this. I need something better. And I'm so proud of her. And then your dad is doing bad. And look at how instantaneously your mom feels bad. You feel bad. It's, when we have narcissists, and whether he's not full narcissistic personality disorder or just narcissistic traits, Um, it's funny how they make us feel so bad, and that we are obligated to take care of them. And then he once again steps up, proves he can take care of himself. So your dad is an interesting character. Now, do you still have a relationship with him?
No, sadly, he passed away in 2003. Yeah, 2003.
Did
Yeah,
you
he
did you have any kind of resolution before he passed, or were you okay and in closure for yourself?
I did. I one of the things that I do is and 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 I've done it recently, but I realize that it's something that I've always done way back then because I was in my second marriage, but I was like in my I think I was 20, I think it was 28, 29 when he passed. And so during my 20s, through my first marriage and everything, I went from like feeling bad for my dad and I would help him out because being the oldest of three, being the oldest of my family, I'm the caretaker. And I remember being really stressed about like one day he's going to be living with me because I'm the one who's going to take care of him. Like that's what's going to happen. But I would go take care of him and stuff. But I didn't talk to him probably for a first couple years there, like, and then when I had, well, probably it feels like a longer period, but I had my first son when I was 19. So it was probably just like 2 years. And then once I had the first grandbaby, that kind of brought us together. And even my mom, like they could be in the same room together, like it kind of like brought the whole family together with the first grandbaby. And like, so that was a positive thing. But to have a relationship with him, I remember talking to his mom, my grandma, talking to my mom, and like learning about him. Like the more I learned, the more I understood where he came from, and it helped me to forgive him, to forgive myself. Like it was this really healing thing. And I remember the second wedding, the first wedding, I got married on the beach, and it was like very inexpensive, and like so the second wedding, I wanted my dream wedding, which I still managed to pull off inexpensively, but it was like at a clubhouse, and it was like and we're having a DJ and photographers, and it was like the real deal in a smaller scale. But I struggled with my dad, inviting my dad and my mom to this event because I knew my dad would bug my mom. Like she was remarried. Her second husband stuff, but like, he could just be a pain in the butt, just attention seeking or just annoying. And I just didn't want my mom to have a miserable time, and be like annoyed. I wanted everybody to have a really good time. And I asked my mom, I asked her how she felt because I was really struggling about inviting him. And she's like, it's your dad, like I can handle whatever. I don't want you to stress about it all. My mom was amazing, my best friend. And she totally supported in it. And I invited him. And it turned out to be both of them, like he was on his best behavior. He was like so happy, and the images and the pictures that I still have of him just dancing and everything, because a year later he passed away. Like it was a year before. I didn't know it. And I'm like, if I would have not had him there, like, and it all turned out, all the fear that I had, which was on my mom's behalf, that,
I love that. The
yeah,
fact that you were so scared of having this because you wanted a drama-free zone, and you were also
yep,
thinking of your mother, and you put that aside and you said, you know what? We're just going to go for it. And your mom, bless her heart too, for saying, you know what? It's your dad. It doesn't matter what our history is. You're his daughter, and you should have him there. And then
yep,
that hindsight is always 2020. It's like
yep,
you look at those moments in your life and go, I'm so happy it happened. I didn't know it was supposed to happen that way, but it happened that way. So I'm so happy for
yeah,
you that you got those moments, because you see how fleeting life is. The fact that he
yep,
passed a year later. So
yeah.
let's talk about your marriage and your relationships, and what do you think that the pattern was and what you've done to get past that. So tell us about your first marriage.
So I met him right at the summer as my mom and dad were getting divorced, and we kind of like bonded over, our difficult childhoods and our particularly we difficult dads. And he was just out of high school. I still had one more year, and he had just graduated. He had done one of those high schools, and he was from Massachusetts, and we met in Florida. He had learned to be a chef, like where they learn a skill while they're going to high school. And so as soon as he graduated, moved down to Florida, got a job at a restaurant at the Marriott, and had his own apartment with his best friend. And we met in the same community at the pool. And so, like, in my mind, he has his life together, like I'm still in high school.
Yeah, that
he has his own apartment. Yeah.
Oh my God, on paper.
And like, so it sets off on paper, it looked great, and in my mind, like, I just want to get out. Like, I'm viewing my mom's going through, all this, there's just all this drama. And I don't know, it always felt like the house was a mess, and she didn't, she was in her own, now looking back, she was in her own like mess, like, so much. But in my mind, it was like, you're just dreaming how my house, everything's going to be so clean and neat. And and you're just dreaming of your world. You cannot wait to start your world. And he was, he had graduated, he had a job. He felt like he had a career, a job, a place. Like, so he was looking, so he was so romantic. Like, on our 6-month anniversary, he like came over and knocked on my bedroom window, and he had a ring with like 6 hearts on it, like, so, like, as a teenager, you're like, you watch all those rom-coms, and it was like, he just played right into it.
Oh, 100%, 100%. You're like, you're every Tiffany song I ever listened to, buddy. Thank you. That worked. You won me.
Yep.
You get married. Oh my gosh. Like, immediately out of high school?
Yep. So at 8, I turned 18, and during this year, it's 1 year from the time we met till I moved in with him, and we got engaged February 14th. We met like in the summer, and that February 14th was what 9 months later or whatever is when he asked me to marry him at the beach, and and he was like, yeah, very romantic. And then I turned 18, and during this time he had been through like 2 or 3 jobs. So he always found something wrong at every job. And he decided that Florida wasn't for him, and he was going to move back to Massachusetts. So I just turned 18 and graduated, and I'm excited because I've always wanted to live up north. Like in Florida, you don't have seasons and everything. It's the same all the time. So watching the movies of these cute little towns, like one where I live now, with all the seasons, it totally fed into all the romantic, like
all the
dreams. So I was all for it. Yeah.
Lifetime movies. I know. We don't have seasons here in Arizona either. We have just freaking god awful hot, and then like not as hot, It's like, so you fall into the Lifetime movie, and you think we're going to happily ever after. And I love that you said that about the jobs. My narcissist first husband, I don't know that he was narcissist though. I think he had other things going on, but definitely was abusive. But I remember that doing our taxes, and he had like 7 jobs 1 year. 7.
Yep. Yep.
So when you say that, it's always somebody's fault. There was always something somebody didn't get the paycheck right, or couldn't work with this person. There was always someone else's fault. So that falls right into those narcissists.
And he changed his careers over he still changes his careers.
Oh, wow. Something's gonna settle in, I think, at some point, we hope. But no, maybe that's just his personality. He's never satisfied. Never
happy. Yeah. And just never happy. He's the victim in his own world. And that was then. But I didn't realize it, like, you don't you don't see it for what it is from now, the hindsight. You're like, oh, those are all like red flags. Those are all like, in my mind, I was,
Yeah, and you're not supposed to, because that's, we have to go through that. I just, it's so hard when you're in it and you're like, why am I going through this? Why can't I just have a happily ever after? And, then you're 20, 30 years down the road and you're going, oh, I get it now. That's why that had to happen. So fast forward, so his abuse was mental and emotional.
So like the silent treatments, he would just erupt. He would just be angry. Like you were walking on eggshells. You didn't know who was going to walk in the door after work every day. So when I moved to Massachusetts, we were like engaged, and I was planning like our wedding, and his older sister was helping me. Like I made my own wedding dress, and I was working on all this and dreaming of being a mom, because once you have your little nest and you're fixing it up, you're just start dreaming of your little family. Because that's the one thing I knew that I was going to be my entire life. I didn't know what I wanted to be, but I was going to be a mom. Like I love babies.
Oh my God.
And so like, you're just like in this little bubble dreaming, and he would come home. And I remember, the other thing is his sister owned a farm, like a dairy farm is what she lived on. And she had this huge house. So we took over one of the apartments and we gutted it and redid it. And we were like, that was like part of the project during this time. But I was alone and I couldn't drive. I didn't have my driver's license at this time. And he drove a stick shift, and my mom had a van. So it was like too big to go take your test in. So I didn't. And his car was a stick shift. And I remember him trying to teach me how to drive it. And I would be in tears, and he'd be so frustrated at me that I'm still have PTSD. My sister's tried, and I just cannot learn. Like I totally freeze up. And I think it's from him trying to teach me how to drive his stick shift way back then. But he would come home, and like I would never know who would walk through the door. And I was alone. I was isolated, alone all day long, because I couldn't get off the mountain. So I didn't get a job. And his mom, I overheard them saying, well, she should go shovel shit in the barns or whatever. And I was like, I'm not gonna go work in what? Working in the barn.
You're like, no,
But there was like feeling like that they were disappointed in me. I felt trapped. And his grandfather got really sick one time during this time as well. And that would be used as an excuse to be moody and angry and like, I'm tired. He'd go shut himself in the bedroom. And I had been like alone all day, and it's so excited for him to come home from work. And then he would like be mad at me, like I would have this attitude, and I would be in tears, and this isn't fair. And I remember one time was really bad, and he locked himself in the bedroom, and he was like, I'm tired, I'm gonna go take a nap. And I remember holding the phone and sitting on the floor, and I wanted to call my mom that I wanted to come home. And to this day, I look at it as this crossroads that I could have called her. She would have flown up there, got me, took me home or whatever. But I had told all my friends from school, like this whole story. I'd been selling this whole story of this Lifetime movie that I was living, and I couldn't take it back. I remember sitting there, and I pictured a different future, and it was just this black hole, and I didn't know what I was going to do. Like I couldn't change direction. And there was also that religious part. Like we were living together. We weren't married yet, but we were planning on getting married. But it was also bad as far as how I was raised. It was like I had made a commitment already. And so to leave would be like that. It would be like, I guess getting divorced or saying that I had been living in sin up until that, by living with him before we got married, whereas if I just went ahead and got married, that would erase that, I think is how I thought of it. So I think I felt really like trapped by how I was raised and trying to be the good girl. And also I couldn't see another path. Like I saw this future. It was all in my head, how it was going to be. And so I stayed, and we got married and we had 3 kids. And it was when my oldest he was he was 8 when I left. I think they were like 3, 6, and 8. So it was like within a year before that. My oldest was like, was acting like him, like being really disrespectful. Where I would lay down the law because I was like the stay-at-home mom. I was either working part-time or I had a home daycare for a few years while the boys were little. So I was the parent, and then so he would do whatever, and I'd be the disciplinarian, and then dad would come home and erase whatever I did. He would like undermine, and they saw the disrespect that he had for me. And so then when Alex started like acting that way, it clicked in my head that I'm raising 3 boys that are they're going to treat women with no respect, because the underlying thing is their dad has no respect for women. Like, I think that's a huge thing. And seeing it after I've been divorced and watching him go through all these relationships and more career changes and all of that, and it's something that I'm struggling with, those 3 adult boys right now, is the utter women take advantage of you. They steal from you. Women are bad. All of them. Every like, and yeah.
I have to interject really quick. That is such a cool perspective, because I remember my profound moment when he was getting violent with me and throwing things, and seeing my 2 girls in the corner watching this. And my thought was, they're going to think it's okay to get a guy that does this to them. And so it's really interesting. You, from the boy perspective, was, if they're going to think it's okay to treat women that way. Isn't that, it's ironic that it doesn't matter what gender our children are, when you have a parent who's displaying this disrespectful, abusive behavior, we have to get our kids out of it. And that's funny that you said that, because it's not funny, it's amazing. Again, more of a connection than you and I have, because that was a profound moment. My girls were 6 and 8, and my son was 10 months old. So I love that you said that. So it continues, this disrespect, and I'm assuming that he has equal visitation or some visitation.
Yeah, so when we divorced, and in my mind, the only way that I got divorced, the only way that I made it okay, was to save my kids. Like, if I maybe wouldn't have been strong enough to get myself out or to get divorced, because if it wasn't for the kids, but saving my kids, once that clicked, and I was like, I have to do this for the kids, even if they're away from him half the time, it will make a difference rather than this full time. And also I realized my part in it, because it was like, he's the bad guy, I'm the peacemaker, I'm the one who's walking on eggshells. And I knew the relationship, the way it had gone that far was because I was like smoothing everything out, walking on, like whatever, however he wanted it. And I think he's not bipolar, but where everything has to be super clean in a certain way, like
OCD.
OCD. I think he has OCD, and it's like really worsened with age, but it was like the beginning stages. So like literally in his mind, things had to be done a certain way, or it was very upsetting.
Yeah,
and
wanted
like
total control, and that's a very common thing when you have those insecurities, or you've been raised in an environment where there was no control, which his upbringing,
it was.
Sounds like that instilled something where he didn't have that control, so he was going to make sure he had that control in that way.
Yeah. So I felt like by that it was okay to leave to save the kids, like by staying, even though you're not the one, you don't see yourself as like the bad guy, like he's the one who's throwing the temper tantrums or whatever. And you think your kids will know, but you realize your part in it you're teaching your kids that it's okay, that you're supposed to walk around and cater to them, and walk on eggshells, and like you're teaching, like that's just as unhealthy and toxic.
It's codependence. You're just carrying on codependence from your kids. And it's so funny that when we're in these abusive relationships, we're like, oh, it's not that bad because I can take it. Because in my mind, oh, I can deal with this. I was like that too. All of a sudden, it's like, okay, if I want to take it, that's my decision. But when these kids grow up and there's this pattern, whose fault is that? That's my fault because I kept them in a situation that I should not have.
Yeah.
So,
And so many people stay in relationships because the family unit, keeping the family together, is the number one priority, especially in religious households. You, at all costs. I think adultery is the only biblical reason, apparently, that's taught that you can get divorced over, or else, you, you're going to hell. It's a very black and white thinking. And they don't acknowledge the abuse, like, you, at all. Like, and I sat down.
Yeah, and depending on how strict of a religion it is, it's like almost expected that you're going to be submissive and you're going to be treated like a second class citizen because it's religion is based on, historically going back to control. And it
Yep.
started, it started so far back. That's how the government controlled the people. And then the churches started and continued this. So in religion, there's still sort of an antiquated thought process. Now, that's not all religions. I got a disclaimer out here, guys, and I think there's nothing wrong with any religion that works for you if it's positive and it helps you and it doesn't instill control over other people or limiting beliefs. So let me just throw that little disclosure out there.
I'm not yeah, we're not bashing religion. It's
No.
just how it works, how they make it work for them. Because
Yeah.
I was the one, he was not raised super religious. He was raised Catholic, and so they would go to church on Sunday and they would go home and their dad would beat their mom, like, so so he was by the time he was an adult, he was like very anti anything to do with Christianity or religion or God or any of it, because he just saw it as his dad pretending, one day a week and the rest of the day, so he was very dark about it. But I wasn't as dark, I guess. And so by the time I became a mom, I did leave the church when I was a teenager or whatever, like I went through all of that. And then when I became a mom, I was like, I just want to go back. I just want the good part of it, the basic, like take them to Sunday school, or like the good stuff that you get out of it. So I went back and I started taking the boys, and he didn't want anything to do with it. And then he got really curious. I think it was like the control thing. It's like, what are you up to? So he came, and the funny part is that he didn't have any interest in it. And at one point we separated. When I was pregnant with the second one, he pressured me. He wanted me to get an abortion, and he's very money oriented. Like, he was like, we can't afford another one, and he wanted me to get an abortion, and I absolutely refused. So for a while I moved in with my mom, and we separated. And one of the stipulations when we went back was like, he's like, you can take the boys to church or whatever, but I don't want to hear anything about it. And I ended up getting back with him. And then, so it was funny that, I don't know how many months it was that he got really curious about what I was up to and started going to church. And then he got baptized. We did Bible studies with the pastor, and we did double baptism, and he became a head deacon in that church. So when I left him, I left the whole church. I left my childhood church. I had to walk away. They all disowned me. Like, they all took his side. That's the crazy part. That still, since then, some of them have came back. Like, it's been very validating. He dated lots of women in the church. They all saw the other side of him. So the truth eventually came back out, and a few people have reached out and, like, apologized. But
that's, it all comes out in the wash. But that time that cycle is going is so hard, because you just want to scream it from the rooftop and be like, you guys have no idea what this person is. And that's the problem, is when you get ixnayed from something that's supposed to be about love, then it's not. I don't think that. I think spirituality is more about love, and the church is about rules. If they can kick you out for the life you're living, that wasn't even of your fault, from the result of choosing this man. And oh my gosh, I'm I'm going back and I'm like, oh my gosh, we were in the military and he, mine was physically abusive. And I remember we went to his first sergeant and his CO, and it was almost like, I felt like they looked at me like, well, what did you do to make him do that to you? That's the feeling I got. It was like so normal in the military that men did domestic violence, and they bred alcoholics in the military. And I just remember, thank God I was a smart cookie at that young of an age. I think I was 20 at that time. And I remember talking to someone who was out of the military, retired. He was a master sergeant. And I remember just saying, this is what's going on. And he said, you better get over there. You're a civilian Marine. They don't own you. They own your husband, but they don't own you. So get over there and get them, to help you. Well, in the military, you don't get therapists and counselors. You get chaplains. And so what did he encourage? Come to our church on Sunday. And I'm not saying that it was a bad thing, because it did help him straighten up a little bit, but he did the same thing. He got really involved in it. And, then it was like, now he's controlling my belief. Now I have to go to church even if I don't want to, So it's amazing how sometimes, religion can harm because it isn't with the intent that it should be, which is just pure unconditional love for one another and community. So we could talk all day on this, but we have 20 minutes left to go. But I want to skip to second marriage and just kind of briefly tell us how you've progressed, how you went to more narcissistic relationships. And I know how, because I lived it, but let's tell the audience and listeners how you ended up in another narcissistic relationship, and then the moment you finally recognized it to really live the life that you live now.
So I got brave enough to leave, but I was terrified. I was, young. I was 27 with 3 young boys. And I was in the middle of getting a job applying for like a floor secretary, because my mom was a nurse, for many, many years at the community hospital. And so like, she wanted me to be a nurse, but I failed the math and she exam. So I'm terrible at math. So I was like, Mom, and I knew, and I don't like the sight of blood, even though my mom's like, you get used to it, but I still to this day do not. So I don't think that I would have. I just wasn't a nurse, but I tried. And in that process, I learned that, that the hospital is a great career place. So I was like going through getting that job, which was a long process. And one night, my brother, and my mom and a bunch of her work friends and stuff, they were like, you need to come out with us. And so my brother's best friend, it was a DJ at this little like neighborhood bar. And so I went, and that was where I met the husband number 2, who to this day, because I'm more of like introverted. Like I'm great one-on-one, but like in a crowd of people, I'm like the quiet one who's listening. And I remember sitting at the table with my mom and her friends and stuff, and I was waiting for my brother to get there, because we did ballroom dancing lessons, and then his best friend would put on whatever we wanted, and so then we would dance. And so I was waiting for my brother to get there, and I was avoiding eye contact with anybody else in the park, because nobody there looked interesting at all. And I remember the narcissist came over, and I remember him asking me if I wanted to play pool, and I was like, I don't know how to play pool. No, I'm not interested or whatever. And I can't remember his specific words, but I remember how I felt, like that I had to prove myself. It was this instant like, oh, I'll show him. And we ended up playing pool, and then we went and played darts. And I remember him asking like, oh, does your family miss you? And I was having so much fun, that I was like, no, and that whole night. And then we exchanged phone numbers, and he went home and told his mom, he's like, I found the girl that I'm going to marry. And and it was like one of those, like, it felt like, I remember when we walked out to the cars, he walked me to my car, and I remember him walking in his car, and like, and he drove this like expensive car, which later on I realized he couldn't afford, but at the time you don't know that. And I remember thinking like he was like throwing money around. So I'm terrified. I have no idea. Like, I'm in the midst of like, I have to figure out how I'm going to support these 3 kids. I'm going through this ugly divorce, like all the stuff's going on, and I'm terrified. I don't even know if I can do it. Like, I've made it this far, but I know what I need to do, but I don't know if I can do it. And he just seems like the one with all the answers. So like it was just like, hey, I'll help you get this apartment. I'll help you get a car, trade your car and get I got a more affordable car. Like, and he was like there helping me to solve these like problems, so he was like the knight on a shining horse, and I just let him. It was so easy to fall into that, and I don't think that I loved him. I loved his family. Like, I remember meeting his family and being like, I wish they were my family, kind of a thing. I met his girls. He had 2 little girls, and like, we met September. He brought me up to Pennsylvania to meet his daughters, and his mom and everything lived up here. His dad and stepmom lived in Florida. And I remember I met his daughters, and I was like, I want one of those, because my dream was to have a little girl. And I was like, I want one of those. So it was like all those things, like that I wanted. I could just see this whole other, and he wanted more kids, and he just, like, those beginning, that first year was just all about like, we had the same dream, like I could be a stay-at-home mom. And it was like he handed my heart desire on a silver platter and was like, I got it all right here. And
it was too easy. He studied. Yeah.
He did. He became.
Yes, that's what they do. That's textbook. Let me see what she needs. I will become that. That is coincidentally my second marriage as well. I called him the knight in shining armor. I mean, that was like literally my name for him, because when you've been in this abusive relationship, anything better than that. Oh, well.
And he wasn't controlling. He was controlling in a different way.
Yes.
I did not see it, because the other one was controlling where I had to ask permission for every dollar I spent, whereas the second one was just like, oh, if you spend too much more, we'll just make more next week. Like, his whole attitude was just like, and I was like, oh, he doesn't care. Like, he's not controlling me. Right. So complete opposite.
Yes, there's the covert narcissist versus the overt, which is your first. Same here. My second one was not a narcissist, but he said to me the same thing, or he told his friend, there's the woman I'm going to marry. So again, our parallel paths. Oh my gosh, every time you say something, I just go, whoa, we are the same person. But that, what they do too, when you're, and I don't like the word damage, but when you're unhealed from previous abusive situations and you haven't found your worth and your belief in yourself, you're going to keep finding the same man with a different face. And a lot of men will come in, swoop in, and be the hero. And, they're going to be the same narcissistic personality, or, even an egomaniac. They don't even have to be full on narcissist, but they'll see that. They'll see this woman who's been victimized or broken, and I don't like that word, but in their mind, they right. see a broken woman, and I'm going to come in there and I'm going to swoop in there. So yeah, it's interesting. Excuse me. It's interesting how, you and I both, it took a while for us to find it. So what was your moment, your defining moment, where you finally realized, oh my gosh, I have to stop doing this? Was this after your second divorce?
No, so it was during this. So during, I was with him. I was with the first husband 10 years, and I was with the second one 14 years. So it was during this time I thought it was alcoholism. So I remember, and I kept, and it cycles where I am like, I'm not doing this anymore. And then he's like, I'll do whatever and counseling or what, or I'll stop drinking. And in my head, it was the drinking. And that's where I learned about being the codependency was like, because I would go to the library and I would get books and I learned about codependent alcoholism. And I felt like he didn't fit quite into the alcoholism. And then it was like, at one point I was going to leave. He moved up here to help his brother's business. He sold his business that he had started in Florida during like 2007, right before that recession period. He got out of it. And then he came up here to help his brother out. And then it turned into like a lot more opportunity in Pennsylvania. So I wasn't going to move. I had shared custody with the 3 boys' dad, and I was never going to leave them. But we were going to get divorced. So I was going to leave him then, because those up to those years, like this was ongoing. Like I knew the day after I married him that I had made the biggest mistake of my life. Like we had this huge dramatic moment where the mask came off in front of everybody, and I cried all night long. I knew that I knew then I had made a horrible, horrible mistake, but I could not walk out there. I couldn't tell my family and my friends, who were just at my dream wedding, by the way, like that it wasn't, he wasn't who they all thought like that I had to get out. I couldn't, like I had just sold everybody on I didn't know. And looking back, there were little signs, like the little red flags that you see now. But at the time, it wasn't, those weren't red flags. Those were like the gaining sympathy, like, because you're have so much empathetic. So the tears over his daughters, being separated from his daughters, like, there was like those key things that I've since learned because I went to the library, and in my search of that, I picked up this book that said, should I stay or should I go? And I started flipping through it, and each chapter was a different like personality disorder. And there was, because there are certain situations or relationships that cannot be fixed. No amount of counseling, you can't change, you can't do anything. Like that's how it's going to be forever. So just accepting it and saving yourself and getting out. And I think in my head, I was looking for permission by this time, permission from the universe. I don't know, that I can do this again. And the second time it was hard because I felt like I really failed, like here I was going to go through a divorce again. And it was my choice in both situations. I'm the one leaving. I'm the one, they're doing all the things to try to change your mind, that you're the bad guy. And when they can't change your mind, then you're the bad guy. And then the stories slandering starts. And so I had done that the first time, and I knew I was going to have to do that the second time. And I knew he would do it the second time because I read that book on the chapter, and I started reading it, and I think I turned icy cold. I remember standing in the library and I just turned icy cold, and our whole relationship from the moment I met all the way through fit classically into the narcissism thing. I had no idea what a narcissist was. I thought it was like, those egos, the guys who, like talk big, and I didn't really see him like that, like I could see how he could not be confident. He could turn it on and, and be charming and everything. But, like I didn't see him as being like, the guy on Beauty and the Beast, the talks to himself in the mirror. Like that was my image of a narcissist.
Gaston.
Yeah, Gaston. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. That's great. But you just said you saw it as vanity, not narcissism. Oh, that's really a good observation, because we didn't know what narcissism or sociopath. I mean, all these psychology terms today, none of us knew what that was.
No.
And if you're brought up in a family where, like mine, it's like, that's just a man's man. That's just how a
Yep.
man acts. And my father was the head of the household, and my mother was submissive. And not that my mom didn't stand up at times, there was a lot of arguing. But it's funny, my watching that was like, well, that's what you're supposed to do. You're just supposed to take it. You're just
Yep.
supposed to like do what they want you to do. That we grew up in a codependent household, went into
Yeah.
codependent marriages, and continued codependent until we finally said, no more, Jack. We're out of
Nope.
here. So we're gonna find out now when and how everything changed for you and what you're doing now that you just are so proud of, and how you've overcome everything.
Well, I think learning your part in it, because you're also like raised in like it takes two. And in my head, I was like, well, I know it's not me, like I'm like bending backwards to keep everything to peace or whatever. And realizing that what codependency is and that your part in it. So really things do change when you start changing yourself. It sends a ripple effect around everybody around you, including him. And as I became standing firm with my, and voicing, using my voice and standing firm and reading. I remember finding support, like in books. And there was this counselor that I just stumbled across her page on Facebook, Dr. Sherry Campbell. She did these daily posts, and it was like she was speaking to me. Whatever I was going through, it was like her post was like to me, and it was so affirming, to stay strong, and just do, like, learn to love yourself and to put yourself first, and not not in a fighting way or anything, just in this calm, resolute, you know
I think
way.
one of the biggest steps when you're a codependent, getting out of being codependent, for me, and I had gone through Al-Anon because mine was an alcoholic, and I remember reading something in my Al-Anon book or whatever they gave us, and it was, removing the fear of their reactions. And that was
Yeah.
the hardest thing as a codependent, because everything you did, you said, every movement you made was to make sure they were okay and they didn't go off on you and they don't get mad, or you didn't do one little thing that upsets them. So releasing that was humongous. And once we empowered ourselves in that way, I feel like that's when I started gaining my strength and my mindset that I have to get out of this.
And you're not responsible for their feelings, because I think you make choices, like their voice and is in your head for every decision, like how are they going to react, what are they going to think of this, or and I think it takes a lot of work to get the voice out and to keep telling yourself, like, that their feelings or how they react to what you do isn't your responsibility. Like, they have to own it. Like,
Yes.
everybody has to own their own, and like letting go of the ownership, because I realized I was controlling in a way by doing everything to control his reaction. I didn't want that reaction or whatever.
That's great. I was controlling in a way because I was walking on eggshells and controlling his environment so he wouldn't react in a negative way. That's interesting. I hadn't seen it that way. I never felt like I was controlling, but if I look back, I think it was controlling in that way, where I made sure the kids were perfect, the house was perfect, laundry was done, and I worked in a hospital on graveyard shifts. So I was bringing in, money, and I was mowing the yards, and I was painting the house. Like, I was doing everything. So,
but nothing. In their word, it was never enough. In their mind.
Exactly, exactly. I even had a daycare center in my home when we were in Germany, in the military. So, which brings me to, I mean, you've had these, obviously these ultimate low points between your father and then carrying through to these narcissistic men. Now you're very successful, and I want to know what you know now that you didn't know then that has helped you and can help anyone else that's in the situation that you and I were both in at that time.
I guess it's the thing that like really helps is being grateful. Like, and you still get scared, or because you're doing life on your own. Like now this is all my responsibility, the paying the bills, running life. It's all on me. I don't have anybody to fall off or rescue me from. And sometimes that gets really scary, but looking back, like I guess taking those times to look back to see how far I came, and it gives me, like whenever I do feel scared or stressed or anxiety or whatever about like things that happen now, it's just realizing how far I came, and that I got myself like out of that situation, and just always looking for the positives, just and having the more a gratefulness or a positive that things are going to work out, and taking a step forward, like just like that. It's a mindset, I guess, because people tell me all the time, like, how are you so happy? Or, like, how do you've been through so much. I lost my mom, and 5 years after my dad, who was my best friend, which was like the most biggest thing that I experienced. But I think that also made me stronger. Like that was like, I think a big fear was losing my mom, in life, like when I was little, because my brother passed away. So at a young age, I realized your loved ones leave you, like, and some of my friends haven't even lost grandparents, or, like well into their 30s or 40s. And I had learned that at a young age. So I had nightmares of losing my mom, because she was that core thing when I was little. So like actually losing her as an adult was like my worst nightmare. And I survived it. I did it, and my only regret is that I hope that she can see, because she didn't know. She doesn't know like the divorce, like that, where I'm at right now, and how I'm successful and everything, like,
she
yeah,
absolutely knows.
I just hope that she knows that I love kids, and I have this whole wonderful little family, like all the little families. Like I've created a family like within, where the families, all know each other and are friends. And it's just like, I love my life. And I think,
You created your soul family. And you know what? Family is not always blood. Family is not always just people that you know. It's the people that you resonate the most with, that you connect with. And you just know they have this unconditional love for you. And I love that. And you're fulfilled in your work, your life's purpose with children, and then you have your wonderful sons. And I know they're at a rough age, especially when they're teenagers or preteens. And we've talked about this on the panel. I'm now raising my 14-year-old grandson. So I got to do it once with my son and then my two daughters, and now I'm doing the teenage thing at 14. And I said this on the panel, trust me in this, that even though they might give you a hard time and it may seem that they're taking on some of their father's traits, as long as you're teaching them respect in the home with your boundaries, they will come back around, and they're going to see it's going to come out in the wash like it did before for you in the church. It's going to come out in the wash with your boys. Remember that boys' brains don't fully develop till 25. So you're okay. You're good until 25. So I always ask these questions. If you were to start a movement in the world, and you had a banner, and you were walking down the street with 100,000 people behind you, what would your banners say? What would you want to change about the world?
I guess I guess I'm all about like empowering women, like you can do it. You're stronger than you think you are. You're stronger than than maybe how you were raised, or up to this point that has caused you to believe, like that it's in there and you can do it. You can change your world. You can take a different road, and you have no idea what's around the corner, but it can be way better. But you have to like take those steps forward. Like it all begins with one step. I don't know.
It does though. It
It
does.
does.
It's really good. Hold on. You're going to love this. Okay. It all begins with one step, and you'll see why I like to write down the banners. It's all within us, and it's just a matter of when are we ready to see it? When are we ready to pull it forth? When are we ready to say, today's the day, I have to do this? That something has to change. I always tell my life
Yeah.
coaching clients that you have to be so tired of your shit that you're ready to make the changes necessary and take the action. So that's ties right in with what you never knew, and I love that you're stronger than you think you are, and it all begins with one step. So as we wrap up, my lighthearted question that I ask is, what is your shameless self-indulgence?
Um. Huh. Ice cream.
I I love that you said that. Sabrina's fiance, Dane, we did an episode. He actually said ice cream as well. So I think
Yeah.
that's so funny when I find these people's answers. It differs, and I love it. What kind of ice cream? What's your flavor?
Salted caramel.
Oh.
Cherry Garcia from Ben and Jerry's.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's exactly what Dane said. Dane said he likes the Ben and Jerry's. Dane's gonna be tickled.
I know. I'm always like, I have a date with Ben and Jerry tonight.
I love it. I love it. Well, you deserve some, especially being a single mama of boys. Being a boy mom is not for the lighthearted. That's for sure. It takes a patience that is not something we can learn in books, that's for sure. And I mean, the difference between teenage boys is what I'm realizing. There's such a difference between what my son was and how my grandson is. And thank goodness I got the hard one out of the way, and I adore my son. But this one is a gem. That my grandson is so easy. So,
Oh,
whew,
that's awesome.
thank
Yeah.
goodness. It should be. It should
Yeah.
be. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
If I'm gonna raise a child I did not give birth to, darn it, it better be at least a little bit easier than the one I gave birth to. So
Yes.
I thank you
Yep.
so much, Sharmon. I swear we just have so much in common, and I feel like I know you. We went through the same journey, really, and with just some little defining moments. But I'm so grateful to you for sharing your story. I always say this was an hour that you'll never get back that you gave to me, you gifted to me, and I appreciate you for that. And let's
You for
go, girl. We'll be seeing each
yeah.
other on more panels, and I can't wait for my listeners to hear this episode for sure. So I thank you for being on. Do you have anything you want to share with the listeners anywhere, anything that you have going on? I know you said you want to write a book.
I do. I think that's a secret dream that I think fear holds me. So that's my next obstacle, is confronting uh that wall of fear. And I think a fear is how the story being out in the world, how the people that are in the story will react and how that will affect. So,
It's a healing
but
process. I promise you. Once you write it, it's your story to tell. Remember that.
yeah,
And anyone else who wants to write a book out there, it's your story to tell. You are not responsible. We just talked about this. You are not
yep,
responsible for anybody else's feelings or reactions. So maybe that's that last little tiny piece of healing that you
yep.
could use. And I think it'd be a great book, and I will definitely promote it. So there's that.
Well, thank you.
Absolutely. You're such a captivating storyteller today, and I'm just so glad that we got to get to know you today. So ladies and gentlemen, my listeners, that is Sharmon Johnson, and I'm going to wrap it up. If you have any comments for Sharmon or for me, please contact me at www.lifecoachmaureen.com. And if you want to be a guest, reach out to me for anything. I don't care what it is. Be nice though. 5-star reviews are always welcome, so we can increase the visibility of this podcast and build this community so we can continue to share our stories to help one another. So everyone have a fabulous weekend. We're on a Friday here. So thank you, Sharmon. I appreciate you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to the I Never Knew podcast. If you found today's episode inspiring and educational, please be sure to follow, subscribe, and spread the word. The more people that join the Inc. community, the more it can develop and influence others as we work together for a healthier and brighter future. Until next time.